Great. So we're going to continue talking about how we assess the industry attractiveness. So what you do is you want to draw up a graph. Now we've already talked about the attractiveness criteria in the last video. So you start with attractiveness criteria. There's not something wrong with one pen, there's something wrong with the other one. Then what you've got in your next column will be weight. Then what you have in the following columns would be for each strategic business unit. I'm just going to do two up here for sake of argument. You'll have a score, and then you're going to have a weighted score. A score, and then a weighted score. Okay. So let's have a look here at what some of our potential criteria would be. We might talk about size of the market. Now, the numbers are kind of tricky. Some people do like 1 to 10, some people do 1 to 5, some people include 0, some don't. Keep in mind if you include 0 that we're going to be doing a little multiplying, so if you do 0, it can kind of skew your numbers a little bit. My preference is to at least not go any lower than 1, but it's on my recommendation. So if we think that the size of the market on a scale of 1 to 5 is pretty important, we might give that a 3. Then we look at the size of the market for each different strategic business unit. So let's say we're looking at 3M again, where we're talking about sticky notes, and the market for sticky notes is huge, and that's pretty important, so we might give that like a 7. And so our weighted score would be 21. But I think we talked about like chemical solvents. That market is pretty small, so we might give that a 1, and therefore the weighted score would be 3. Okay. Let's look at another one. High entry barriers might be a good one. So entry barriers, we would say with a lot of the 3M stuff, that's pretty important. So let's give that like a 4. And we'd say that let's see, we're doing stickies. I'd say that the sticky thing, the entry barrier, because you've got proprietary knowledge in the chemical factory and all that stuff, let's give that like a 6. So then we've got a weighted score of 24. And then we talked about the chemicals. Again, I'd say that's a pretty high entry barrier. So we might give that also a 6. So then we'll have 24 there. And let's just do one more. Let's say the value of the brand. I doubt a lot of people get excited when they say, wow, 3M. Probably not. They just think about a sticky. So the brand value itself might not be that important. So let's give that a 2. And let's look at the value of the brand again with the stickies. Oh, well, maybe the value brand of 3M itself is pretty low, but for the stickies, we really like 3M stickies. So we might give that like, I don't know, a 9, and so therefore you'd have 18. And for chemicals, they probably don't think about it at all, so then you're going to have a 2. Okay. Then what you do is you add your numbers up. So you can see me over there. So you add your numbers up. then you come up with your averages. Let's see, how do we do it? So you'd only average out the weighted scores. And then based on these weighted scores, you would come up with your attractiveness factors. And your attractiveness factors, again, that's what you would have along the y-axis of your graph. So I'm just eyeballing it right here, but it seems that the sticky note thing is way more valuable than these chemical solvents. So, and we remember when we did that, we had our sticky notes way over here on this side because it's in a very attractive industry, whereas the chemical solvents were on the other side. So that's one way that you can do. So you can keep in the back of your mind when you draw up your attractiveness scale, you can actually have numbers along the bottom for the weighted average of the attractiveness, or you could give it qualitative things like strong, weak, plus, minus. You have some different choices there. Now, one question I get asked a lot in class when I'm drawing these out is, hey, wait a second, how did you get the data for the y-axis? Because we just talked about the x-axis down here, but how did you get the stuff for the y-axis? You know, how do you assess the competitive advantage? Well, again, you can do the same thing, just like when we did, for example, with strategic group mapping. You can come up with some assessments that way as well. So now we've talked about how you draw out the x-axis. There's my thing here. Now what you'll wind up doing, or what we're going to talk about in the next video, is the BCG1 matrix, which answers the same thing, but they're slightly different. Either way, both sets of tools are designed to measure a company's competitive advantage, okay, at the corporate level. So you can use the McKinsey matrix, ranking key success. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to mention. Now, I talked about market attractiveness factors, or attractiveness criteria here. You could just as easily switch these out for key success factors and then do the exact same map to come up with some sort of an indication of the level of attractiveness of that particular industry. Totally fine, just switch that with key success factors. So you can rank things based on key success factors with respect to leading competitors. You do that through this very same matrix that we described. Of course, if you don't want to use any of the tools I'm talking about today, you could just flat out talk about relative level of profitability. Talk about the change in operating margin, talk about the return on invested capital, also possible. But what we're going to talk about in the next one is the BCG1 matrix, which really focuses on relative market share. So I hope you have enjoyed this particular module, and I am looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks.